Content warning. This audiobook contains strong language, sexual themes, supernatural elements, and graphic depictions of death. The author recommends this work for audiences aged 18 and over. If you let your 6-year-old listen, that's on you. Moloch, The Real King of Horror by Ian Bailey. Published by Ashlar Press. Copyright 2025. Chapter 5. On the Road. The book deal for Caroline should have felt like salvation for him. It should have lifted the weight that had been pressing down on him for years. And for a while it did. The money certainly helped. The recognition helped. People wanted to hear what he had to say. And the papers want to know whose shirts he wears. They wanted to shake his hand, hear his thoughts, call him brilliant. But even as the world opened up to him, something inside him closed tighter. The more they celebrated him, the less real he felt. And the dreams kept coming. Not fleeting nightmares, no. These were visions, persistent, familiar. Places that should not exist yet felt more real than the ground beneath his feet. A library of human skin-bound books with eyes blinking on the spines, wondering if he'll save them from their prison, their pages shifting and writhing as he reads them. A hallway of endless doors, some cracked open, revealing glimpses of grotesque landscapes, a sky made of teeth, a city pulsing like a beating heart. A faceless man standing just behind him, whispering in words he could never remember when he woke. Moloch was always there now, watching, waiting. He never acknowledged Moloch when Martha or the kids were around, but he started to talk more openly to him, asking questions, getting ideas. The whispers in his head weren't his own anymore. He knows that now. They had started like echoes, barely distinguishable from his own thoughts. Then they became clearer, more confident. They weren't suggestions anymore. They were becoming commands. Along with this, he started losing time. At first, it was only a few minutes. He'd be writing, blink, and suddenly the clock had jumped forward. Then the gaps stretched. An hour gone. A whole afternoon vanished. He'd wake up to pages stacked neatly beside him, written in his own hand, but the words were not his. The stories disturbed even him. The prose was alive, sentences twisting with feverish energy. Characters on the page moved without him telling them to. Themes bled through the pages that he hadn't intended. Ideas he had never thought of emerged, fully formed, crawling out of his typewriter like things trying to escape. Martha found the discarded scraps of notes written in frantic handwriting, his, to be sure, but clearly rushed and almost incompressible. She tried to piece them together, but the words didn't make sense. Some weren't even in English. Some were nothing but symbols, spirals that made her dizzy when she stared at them too long, like they're trying to hypnotize her, suggest things to her, possess her. When she confronted him, he just smiled, that perfect smile she was beginning to resent. They're just ideas, babe, just scraps of ideas. But he wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. He wasn't himself. She's starting to miss his old self. His debut book tour was meant to have been exhilarating. His name was everywhere. People lined up at signings, clutching copies of Caroline with reverence. Critics hailed him as a new voice in horror, the next Poe, the next Lovecraft, the next king of horror. He felt nothing, though, numb, not what he expected. A hollow feeling that keeps growing with every interaction, with every book he signed. On some level loved it all, relished it even, but his hunger to write more and more was overwhelming. He started to even write lines in books instead of dedicating them to Sarah. Hope you enjoy this. Instead, he wrote, "The town cares for devil's work no more than it cares for God's or man's. It knew darkness, and darkness was enough." The attention started to suffocate him, started to tempt him. Young women would ask him to sign their breasts while flashing him in the bookstore. Others would leave a room key for him with explicit instructions. And on top of all that, the pressure to produce the next book clawed at his chest. He wasn't just writing anymore. He was compelled to. He could feel it inside him, a gnawing hunger that wasn't his own. The drinking and cocaine was a way to calm his nerves. Then it was a way to numb the voices so he could have a normal dialogue with Moloch, hear him properly. The pills came next. He convinced himself they were just something to help him sleep, then something to keep him awake. He stopped keeping track. He stopped caring. Things started to fray in little ways. To an outsider, they may not have even noticed anything wrong. To those that knew him personally, it was obvious something was taking hold. During a reading in Chicago, he zoned out mid-sentence. He had been halfway through a particularly gruesome passage, the audience hanging on his every word, and then he blinked. Silence. He was staring at the last page of the chapter. The audience started clapping. He must have finished the reading, but he had no memory of doing so. Someone in the front row caught his eye, their brows furrowed. Had they noticed? Had he just been reading mechanically, eyes unfocused, mouth moving on its own? The applause sounded wrong, distant, warped, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Then, just beneath the noise, he heard his name, whispered, but no one had spoken. His fingers clenched the edges of the podium. His head turned slightly, scanning the crowd. He could feel it. Someone watching him. His vision blurred, and for just a second, the audience shifted. The rows of people twisted like an old film reel burning up in the projector. And there, standing in the back of the room, was a sexy vintage lady leaning on Moloch's shoulder. Standing tall and proud of the work he's doing. His silhouette was unmistakable, dressed in a simple, dark, three-piece suit, head slightly tilted, his black, bottomless eyes locked onto him. The author blinked. Gone. The applause returned to normal. The audience was still there, still staring, still waiting. He forced a smile, laughed it off, turned the page, but his hands were shaking. His publicist leaned into his ear, saying, "Ground control to Major Tom. You drifted off for a second there. You okay?" Yeah, I'm okay. I just thought I saw someone I knew. I think I need a drink." As with all these affairs, reporters follow the circus that is a whirlwind book tour. The headline read, "Is the King of Horror Losing His Grip on Reality?" An article by Daniel Kessler, Daily Defender, January 1975. Is the King of Horror Losing His Grip on Reality? By Daniel Kessler. Here was a time when novelists were simply writers. Now they are rock stars. Take the case of our newest literary sensation, a man whose debut horror novel, Caroline, has taken the world by storm. His name is on every horror reader's lips, and his book is flying off shelves faster than bookstores can stock them. But behind the hype, the signings, and the late-night talk show appearances, something is wrong. For the past 4 weeks, I have been on the road with him, trailing the growing media circus that surrounds his every move. I expected to find a man enjoying his success, an overwhelmed but thriving talent, adjusting to newfound fame. What I found was something else entirely. He doesn't sleep. Not really. He collapses. I have watched him drift off in the back of limousines, his head lolling to the side as if someone had flipped a switch, only to jolt awake minutes later, drenched in sweat, his eyes darting as if he had seen something the rest of us could not. At signings, he smiles, shakes hands, and poses for photos. But something is off. His eyes flicker from face to face too quickly, as if searching for someone, or avoiding someone. And then there are the things he writes in his adoring fans' books. Passages from stories he hasn't published, sentences that seem wrong, not just eerie, but foreign. One young woman opened her signed copy to find the words, "The ones who walk behind the paper will not let you leave." She laughed nervously, but I saw the way he stared at the page afterward as if he hadn't realized he had written it. Then there are the disappearances. 3 cities so far. A girl went missing after a signing in Chicago, a bartender in Albuquerque, a bellboy at the hotel in Dallas. They were there, and then they weren't. I asked him about it once, casually, over drinks. He blinked, confused, as if hearing about it for the first time. Then, very softly, he said, "People disappear all the time." And he smiled. Now I sit in his hotel lobby, waiting for another signing to begin, wondering if I should even be writing this article. Fame changes people. But this isn't just fame. This is something else. Something is very wrong with him. And if I'm being honest, I'm afraid to ask what. One night, after a reading in New Mexico, the author woke up in a hotel bathtub, fully clothed, drenched in cold sweat. He had no idea how he got there. In the mirror above the sink, a message was scrawled in red lipstick. More. Write more. He climbed out of the tub and leaned against the sink, hands trembling as he fumbled with the tap, watching the water run. Clear, clean, pointless. The light above buzzed like a dying insect. He splashed his face, hoping it would snap him back to something solid. It didn't. Then, without asking permission, a memory surfaced. The dinner table, the kids still young. Grace poking at her peas with a fork, oversized for her hand. Martha laughing. God, that laugh. Full-throated, careless. Not the brittle sound it would later become. The trailer warm with baked pasta and cheap red wine. A storm chewing at the windows outside. He was talking about deadlines, about editors, about how no one gave a shit about short stories anymore unless they had sex or murder by page 3. "You need a break," Martha had said, pouring him another glass. Her hand brushed his arm, a small gesture but real, solid. "Go with your friends this weekend. You haven't seen them in months. We'll be fine here. The kids are dying to try that new board game anyway." He'd smiled then, a real one, or what passed for it, told her he'd think about it. But he didn't go for the break. Not really. He went because the silence in the house had taken on an edge. Because their daughter had asked, "Why does Daddy look tired all the time?" And Martha had flinched like she'd been struck. And now the memory was back, curling around the rot that festered behind his eyes. But it wasn't warm anymore. It twisted. His mind pulled the threads loose. Martha's laugh echoed with a false brightness. Grace's voice grated. The storm outside no longer comforting, but hungry. He braced himself on the counter, the mirror a fractured version of his own face. He remembered the pasta, remembered thinking it needed salt. How smug they all looked, trying so hard to be happy. He should have stayed home, should have played that board game, shouldn't have taken that goddamn break at the lake. Instead, he let something in, and now he couldn't get it out. He was alone in the room, or so he told himself. He had vague memories of a peculiar young woman who seemed to be infatuated with his every move. He saw her at every event, every party, every book signing. Was this lipstick note on the mirror a message from her? He couldn't think of anything more miserable than an infatuated stalker. So much so it planted the seed for a new story in his mind. As he undressed to get into the shower, to his surprise he found the lipstick in his own pocket. He was still rattled when he got to the next event. A co-signing with some mid-list horror guy named James Vale. Small venue, indie vibe. Folding tables and paperbacks stacked in crooked towers. The kind of place that smelled like mildew and ambition. They sat side by side behind a makeshift table, a poster hanging above them that made both their names look far more important than either of them felt. Between signings, Vale kept glancing over at him. Not in awe, more like recognition. Like a man watching someone step into a role he'd once auditioned for and barely survived. They'd only just started the signing, but already Vale was talking too much. In that way people do when the silence between them starts to stretch long enough to feel dangerous. You ever get hand cramps from signing your own name so many times? Vale muttered, scrawling his signature across a glossy cover without looking. Feels like I'm forging myself into oblivion. He chuckled but didn't wait for a response. I miss when this was a dream, before it became a fucking admin job. Our author gave a polite nod, eyes drifting to the queue, avoiding the stack of books bearing his name in embossed letters. You've got that look, you know, Vale went on, like it's still new to you, but not in a good way. He glanced sideways again. Wide-eyed, like you've seen behind the curtain and it didn't make you wise, just dependent. That earned a sideways glance. Thanks. Vale smirked. Don't worry, we all start that way. First taste of fame and you think you've won the lotto, but really, you've just been seen, and now they're watching. Another book slid across the table, another fake smile. You seen her yet? Vale finally asked, flipping the cap off a pen with his thumbnail. Who? Tall, pale, red lipstick. Looks like she stepped out of an old photo and didn't quite dry off. He raised an eyebrow. You talking about a fan? Vale chuckled. I don't think she reads. He paused, his tone flattening. But she shows up, always shows up. Different cities, same woman. Doesn't need a pass, doesn't queue, just appears, close enough to smell. You'll know when it's her. Now it was his turn to smirk. And what? She asks for a signature? Vale's eyes darkened. No, she the type that just gets in the car, fucks you like she's trying to rip something out of you, then vanishes. He gave a dry laugh, but his hand trembled slightly as he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a napkin, old, soft, almost translucent from the oils of time. A single lipstick print bloomed in the center. Beneath it, scrawled in faint red ink, You'll write better now. He slid it over without looking. She only comes to the ones dared look into the abyss, and somehow they've let something in. The line of fans moved, books shuffled forward, and neither of them said anything for a beat. Then Vale's head tilted. Don't look now, he muttered. But he nodded towards the back of the queue. There she was, tall, pale, hair like black thread caught in the rain, blood-red lips, no badge, no book, just standing there, calm, as if the queue had formed around her. And suddenly there it was, that scent, a faint trace on the air, unplaceable, not perfume, not sweat, something sweet and burnt and rotten all at once, like singed flowers wilted in a vase over a humid spell. He followed Vale's gaze. Their eyes met, uncertain, recognition, disbelief. They looked back. Gone. Nothing but a gap in the line, a yawning absence. And just behind it, a man halfway down the queue lit another cigarette. The smoke curled upward in lazy swirls, the shape of something exhaled, or maybe leaving. He looked back at them, confused, like he wasn't sure why they were staring at him, like they'd seen something he hadn't. Vale swallowed. You saw her, right? He didn't answer, didn't need to. Martha tried calling again while he was on the road. He didn't often answer the phone. When he did pick up, he was slurring, incoherent. Sometimes she could hear people in the background, music playing, strangers laughing, voices deep and distorted. For Martha, the first real sign that he was in trouble came when his agent called her directly. We found him passed out at the table, they said. He wouldn't wake up at first. Martha swallowed hard, gripping the phone. Did he say anything when he woke up? A pause, a hesitation. Then in a quiet voice, he kept saying someone was in the room with him. Martha didn't ask who. She already knew. This thing is taking hold. Martha sat on the edge of the bed, legs tucked under her dressing gown, the phone with its 20-foot cord idle in her lap. She stared at the muted television across the room, some rerun flickering in the dark, the sound turned down low enough it barely existed. The kids were asleep, the house hollow. He hadn't picked up. Again. She reached for the wine glass on the nightstand, its rim stained with lipstick, and took a sip that had lost whatever warmth it once had. It tasted like something that used to be fruit with ambition. He was in another city, signing books, shaking hands, getting photographed next to women pretending to read horror for the thrill of proximity. And she was here, toothbrush in hand, scrubbing glitter glue off the tiles, school lunches, permission slips, homework, routines. But if it hadn't been for her, she'd sent the manuscript, Caroline, the battered folder he'd abandoned, left buried in a drawer beneath tax returns and forgotten bills. She'd opened it, sorted the pages, retyped the salvageable bits, even rewrote a few sections where the words had collapsed in on themselves, half-baked thoughts scrawled at 3 in the morning, stinking of desperation and cheap bourbon. Just suggestions at first, then whole paragraphs, polishing, sharpening, saving it from itself. And now, he was the king of horror. A bitter laugh escaped, dry as dust, and she drained the glass. She hadn't told him. Of course not. What could she say? That the line everyone quoted, "I was never your daughter, only your reflection," had come to her while folding washing. That the second act twist had bloomed in her mind in the supermarket queue, somewhere between tinned tomatoes and tampons. No, he wouldn't hear it. Not now. Not with everything in his life suddenly gilded and screaming with significance. No room for other voices, only his, and Moloch's. She crossed the room, switched off the television with the back of her hand. The screen went black, and for a moment her reflection stared back, flat, drawn, eyes that didn't blink. Jealousy curled in her stomach like something old and hungry. Not about the money or the tours or the fanfare. It was the myth of it. The way the world had decided he was born brilliant, as if talent had fallen into his lap like a gift from the void. No one saw the patchwork. No one saw what was stitched together in the quiet hours while he slept or raged or vanished into another spiral. She pulled the curtains and killed the light. Let him have it. Let him bathe in applause and praise. One day he'd remember what he forgot, what wasn't his, what came from her. And when that day arrived, she wasn't sure if she wanted gratitude or his bones. The room fell dark, the only glow now from the television's afterburn across the glass screen, slow to fade. Martha turned away from it, exhaled, and slipped beneath the covers, the phone still cradled in her hand like a relic from a better time. She didn't see the shape in the corner. But we did. A tall figure, stitched from absence, nested in the shadows near the dresser, head tilted, watching. Moloch. He stood utterly still, hands clasped behind his back, the way men do at funerals when they've run out of lies. His black eyes shimmered like oil beneath a dying star. He didn't move, didn't speak. But he smiled. Not at her, at us. As if he knew what she'd done, what she hadn't said. As if her silence was just another verse in the story he'd already written. The screen finally blinked to black. And so did he. He got drunk again after a reading one night. Stumbling back into his hotel room, he caught his reflection in the window. At first he thought it was just him, just his own shadow. But the longer he stared, the more he realized it wasn't moving when he did. Moloch stood behind him, just outside the edges of the light, smiling. He didn't turn around. He just whispered, "What do you want from me?" The shadow's head tilted, black pits where eyes should have been. "You already know. We have a pact, you and I. Don't you remember?" Martha sat on the edge of their bed back home, the phone gripped tight in her hands. She had just finished another call, another hotel, another night of bad news. She stared at the floor, her heart heavy, knowing that whatever had taken hold of her husband was only getting stronger. He was losing himself, and she didn't know how to bring him back, but she had to try. She had to, before there was nothing left of him at all. About 2 weeks after he returns home, his constant pacing, restless, searching for anything to fill the void, is wearing everyone thin. The house feels smaller with him inside it, his presence heavy and unsettled. Martha watches him drift from room to room like a ghost and knows something has to change. "We need to get away," she tells him one evening, her voice measured, careful. "Just us. No distractions. Just breathe for a while." They settle on Colorado, a random place with no history for either of them, no significance, no ghosts of the past clinging to it. The kids are sent off to friends' houses, and with nothing but a hastily packed suitcase and the thin hope that distance might be enough, they head for the Rocky Mountains. They found the Berkley Hotel just as it was closing for the season, but they let them stay for 3 nights before they might get snowed in. It felt creepy even for them, the only 2 breathing souls in the dining hall. While sitting there eating dinner in the grand hall all on their own, Martha makes him promise to remain clean. But like all junkies, he agrees to pacify, not to comply. One thing Martha has been struggling with is a line that one of the rehab nurses told her in private when he was in rehab last time. "Once a junkie, always a junkie," and to "come to terms that all junkies are good liars. Take everything as a lie unless you can prove it to be true." This reality hit Martha hard. At first she refused to believe that he would so brazenly lie to her, but time and time again he has. She's starting to read him better, see what his tells are. She is bracing herself that one day she'll find him and he won't come back. While out at the Berkley Hotel, he had an idea for a story, one that was going to help him work through some of his darkest secrets. After writing The Boy, he realized that he could use his writing as a method of dealing with fears, phobias, and childhood trauma, a way he hoped that would replace his cocaine habit. On Saturday night, sleep eluded him. The silence of the empty 140-room hotel pressed in, thick and suffocating. Restless, he wandered the halls, following the dim glow of exit signs until he found himself at the bar. A lone bartender, Brady, poured him a drink, his voice low and measured as he spun tales of the hotel's past. The stories slithered into his mind, curling around his thoughts like smoke. By the time he stumbled back to his room, an idea had taken root, dark and inescapable. Back home, the hotel lingered in his mind. It became the stage for something much larger, something monstrous. He sat down to write, and the words poured out. Cosmic horror, paranoia, the slow unraveling of sanity. But beneath the fiction, beneath the ghosts and shadows, he knew what it really was. A confession. Finishing the rough draft left him hollow. He stared at the pages, knowing he had put something real onto paper, something that perhaps should have stayed buried. But when his friends invited him to the lake, the manuscript came with him, and after a few drinks, when they begged for a story, he didn't hesitate. He decides to read to them the draft of his latest novel, The Shimmering. Even Martha hasn't seen this one. This one is personal, deliberate, and raw. After finishing the first chapter, there is just silence. No chuckle, no response. Just a gap in time until finally Mike exclaims, "What the fuck?" This chapter may have ended, but the story doesn't. Return next Monday for what waits in the dark. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and leave a comment to share what the shadows may have whispered to you.